Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this second video of the multi-purpose or mech carrier, I'm going to show you how to assemble this beast. I actually didn't show all the parts in the intro to this video. There are a few more parts, mostly like this section here is like the interior mechanisms, the cogs and gears, rail gears, or gear rails and all of that, but you will see in a minute how this all goes together. It's actually not that complicated to assemble, although it looks a lot, but yeah, you will see. Alright, let's start. So first thing we start with is the lower back of the hull. This holds the rear landing gear, and I already pre-assembled some of the landing gear parts. So you have the main landing gears, the structures, you have the small tires. You can print them in F69 rubber or any other rubber resin, and the rest of the construction is this arm here, this hinge, and there's another arm with a 90-degree gear. And when you assemble these, make sure that they move real loose. They have to move without any friction at all for the mechanism to work correctly. So if you paint the parts, make sure you scratch the paint off at the contact spots so it really moves nicely and loose. Alright, with that said, let's start with the assembly. For ease of assembly, I've marked the parts where they go. Like here, for example, this is the right side. The other one is on the left side. First of all, I'm gonna take the right side landing gear, push the pins in here. It's always good to like slowly wiggle the parts in. The resin I used for this print is Resione M58, which is kind of a tough, very sturdy resin, but still, I mean, like most of the resins, after some time it can become brittle. Although I have very good experience with this resin, sometimes if I'm not too careful, of course I can break stuff. And yeah, so best practice is to go about it slowly wiggle the parts in and make sure to be careful. Sometimes you hear a snapping sound, that's okay. You can hear the difference when it actually cracks. In that case, of course, you will have to replace the part. Yeah, it happens, but most of the time it works well. The tolerances are tested so that it actually shouldn't produce much failure. So left side, same procedure again. Plug this in here and in here. Pluggy, here it goes. This is the rear landing gear. And now to continue, you have to add the covers. Here's the right side. You can simply push them into this holder here on the side of the gear. Same thing again with the paint. If there's too much paint, becomes too thick, doesn't go in, so you might have to scrape some of the paint off after painting at the contact spots. Alrighty, so let's continue. For assembly, it is crucial to have the parts fold up. So if you assemble the landing gear, set it down on a flat surface, push it down, make sure that the panels line up with the lower hull part before you continue with the assembly. This is essential because the gears, they have to be in the correct position. Now here, above this middle point here, is where the 90-degree gear sits. That's gonna drive the whole back landing gear. So here, for construction, it is essential that this opening, you can see it here, like the cross opening has to be straight. One line here, one line there, straight, 90-degree angles like this. Make sure everything's correctly closed, and then we're good to continue. Now to close this up, here's the second part of the rear hull, and here you have this part here. This constrains the small gear in place, so you just have to very easily put it on top, the lower hull part, just like this. Push it down. So, and now you can see these constrainers here, they hold the gear in place. Then there's another back hull part that just goes in here like this. This is all snap fit. It will be later connected by pins to hold them in place, but we're gonna get to that later. But as you can see, it already holds in place nicely. The next thing is the construction of the mechanism inside. Now, the first thing you have to do is to put in the wings. The main wings, left and right. These wings, they contain a gear rack that controls the fold-out VTOL thrusters on the engines on each side. So you have to put these in first. Fairly easy. You just take one of these, push it in, there's a rail inside that guides you, and you can just push it in like that. Let's put in the wings. Also the wings should be quite stiff, so there's not a lot of wiggle. In this case, of course, I also have an added paint layer. Makes it a bit harder to go in, but still works very well because there's almost no wiggling, which is really nice to have. So if you have these painted, for example, just as a quick tip, and they push in hard, put your finger on the inside of the hull and push against it. That makes it easier because there's a thin wall, of course, and it doesn't go in as easily. But yeah, with a little bit of help from the inside, we're all fine, good to go. And the other side. And now once this is assembled, these gear racks, they should move loosely and freely inside here. Next thing we need for the mechanism is the center gear rod, and that just pushes down in the hull here. And then you just have to make sure to line up these arrows to the center of this. Now you can already test it by twisting this, and you see the gear deploys and closes up really nicely and smooth. So that's where we're at. And also the rails on the wings, the rail gears or gear racks on the wings, they move as they are supposed to move. So now we close it up again, set it down, make sure everything is straight. So now before we put these front gear racks into place, we have to first install the release mechanism for the cargo crates and the mechs. Make sure to put it in the right way. So there's the opening for the hinge of the mech shoulder hook, and this has to go in the back. So this part here has to go to the back side, point to the back side, put it in, then you take the knob. Also make sure to put it in the correct way so it can fold over. So here's some space for it to fold down into position that holds the clamp up later. And then you just have to take a little pin, push it in from the side, and then just make sure it is pushed all the way in so the whole mechanism can sink down in the opening freely and loosely. And then just put it up, push the knob down, set it in place, and then we can continue with the gear racks. So we put in the front, left and right, and then we come in from the back, push these in, the way around, push these in, yep. And then you can simply put them together like this, and the other side again. So you can see during assembly there's rails inside that hold all these gear racks in place, and the construction is fairly simple. They just push together like this, and it may seem a little bit wiggly and loose, but that's no problem at all. As soon as everything is assembled and covered up, there's parts that keep everything in check. It's impossible for those parts to come apart when you play with the final toy. As soon as these parts are in, make sure that the small arrows line up with the center of the respective gears. And then with that in place, one thing left to do before we cover it up is to add the rear wings or the elevators. And those go in the same way basically as the main wings. You just push them in from the side through the openings, make sure they're completely in. You can see they are held in place by pins that come from the top fuselage part, and those pinholes have to line up. So fairly easy to recognize, and once you set everything up correctly, you can take the top fuselage part and then just shove it in here a little bit, shove it under a little bit. There's pins in front that go under the lower part, and then you just push down everything and it fits nicely. Everything holds in place, very sturdy, there's no wiggling at all, which is very good. And now to finish this part, we can take the gear deployment knob and put it into place like this. The reason why I told you before that you have to assemble this in a 90-degree angle is that way it fits to these stoppers on the opening, because I added these stoppers on the knob, so the knob basically keeps in place, so it cannot move on its own. It needs a little bit of force to move by these stoppers, and as well as closed, as open, you have these stoppers in place. That makes it much more convenient, so your gear won't accidentally give in because it's stopped at the center now. And as you can see, everything works as intended. Gear moves, and the gear racks for the front gear deployment, they move as well. We can turn it back to 0, close it up, and then we continue. The next part is the front hull. Now, with the gear opened, because it's easier to push those gear racks through if they have more wiggle room, you can just take it like this and move these gears on the side here underneath the top pinholes, and then you just wiggle it through. And then you just have to make sure to line up these pins with the respective openings, push everything inside, and there you go, everything's in place. Now you can close up the gear again, and then you can see those arrows, they should line up perfectly with the center of the hole where the front gear rods go that drive the front landing gear. So to make assembly easier, we're going to start pinning down some of the parts. You have these round openings here in the back, here, on top, here. These openings hold pins, and these pins make sure the parts are connected tight, like not falling apart, because this is still very loose, this can come apart. And those pins are all numbered, so it starts here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and means I need pin number 6. Go up here, you just push them in and they hold in place nicely. And pin number 7. Pin number 7 goes here, connects this part here. Push it all the way in so it holds nice and tight. Now this part holds tight, cannot move anymore, which is going to be helpful for the rest of the assembly. Now we're at the front, assembling the front landing gear. Now this part is a little bit tricky, like a fun little puzzle. So what basically happens here, we have these gear rods, they come in last, I will show you later, that go down, and those gear rods, they drive some more 90 degree angled gears that go down here, like this. So let me quickly show you. Here you can see them in place. And then those drive some arms here on the side that push this slider back and forth, and this opens and closes the front landing gear. So the first thing we have to do, put in the gears, then we have to assemble the slider, and to make the slider move really freely and loosely, I've added these small wheels on the sides. It's a bit tricky to get in, but yeah, consider it as a sort of like physical puzzle or something. And just like this, make sure to hold it up all straight. And then you start with this. Also the arrow indicates where it goes. There's small arrows that point to the front, so you know which way to put it in. So now with these assembled, you have these rails here, left and right. And now you just push it like this, push these wheels into the openings, just very gently, carefully, like this. And then you can turn it around and then push in the back. And here we go. So our slider is in place, and as you can see it, slides freely, very softly. That is exactly what we need for this purpose. So, and it wasn't too hard to assemble, was it? Next part is we have to connect these to the mechanism on top. And the first thing is we take the arms. They are also marked again, left and right. And we have some more connection arms that connect the slider with these gear arms. Those are identical for left and right. First thing you have to do is push them in here, like this. And the other side, make sure that this dent points to the top. So, all connected. Now we have to lift them up, back. So, and now we take the right side, goes here. Connect the right side. Connect this here on top, like this. And the left side, like this. And then these arms are pushed in to the openings in the back. Gently push them in, like this, and again on the other side, gently push them in. So, and now you can see the mechanism is moving, and the gears are rotating as required. Then, before we move on to connect the lower mechanism to the gear racks on top, I want to put in the landing gear, front landing gear first. So, looks like this, and you can push it into the opening here. Like just ever so slightly push it in, and same principle, should move completely freely and easily. Very important. And then we have another arm that connects the slider to the front wheel, and when it's put in, this bulge here that goes to the bottom, this is later pushed up by the slider over this spot here to give it a little bit of extra pull to make sure the front gear really shuts close. And so just slightly, as you can see here, slightly pop it into the openings up here. Very gently wiggle it. These parts are designed so that they have enough flex so that nothing should go wrong, but it can, of course, so always be careful. But even in case if this breaks, these are small parts, they print in less than 45 minutes, I think, so yeah, can be easily replaced. And the front pin goes here into the connection spot at the landing gear. Just gently, and here we go. So now what's left is the gear cover. For that we have to close it up again. Front gear cover is in two parts. I already put those two together, simple hinge, and then you have to take this end here and again put it on these hinges inside here, and finally release the landing gear and then push it in the pin at the bottom of the landing gear. So, and here we go, and that's the landing gear mechanism in front. Now that we have all this in place, we can finally connect the parts, and same principle again, close up everything, make sure everything is nicely closed in the back, front, and then you have to push in these rods with the gears on top, and just make sure that these rails are centered, the markings are centered on the pins. Push it in here, check the orientation, you can see the cross connector, and then push it in. Done. Now what we can do is take the front gear cover part. This has also some rails in here and constraints that keep everything in place. Like here the gears, the gear rods for example, and the gear racks. And this just needs to be pushed in like this. Holds very nicely and tight. So in the beginning you have to push a little bit because it's a tight assembly, so it's not as easy going, but this will change over time the more you use it. Okay, landing gear assembly done. Of course I forgot these things here again. Actually forgot to add the entry ladders for the cockpit again. This is a good way to show you that it's actually fairly simple to disassemble the pieces again, in case you forgot something. So Before we finish the assembly of the front landing gear, of course we have to put in the exit and entry ladders for the cockpit. And to do this, you have to take these slider parts first, push them in here, and you can squeeze them a little bit. They have some flexibility to it, and just squeeze them in like this. And then they go down here so that they can move freely inside here. Like this. Same on the other side. And then just down, and it's in place and can slide freely. So now we can assemble the landing gear again. Just push the gears back in place. Before. It's best to remove the gear rods before you reassemble the landing gear parts. These gear rods should always go in last, and then we just wiggle this in place again, and we wiggle this in place again, like this, and everything is nice. And now we can put in our gears again, push it down. And then we can finally close up top, and it's working nicely. So now to add the ladders. I already assembled the ladder parts, painted them, and these go in really easy. Like you just take one side here, also all snap fit, push it in. And this is how the extended ladder looks like. And then you just slide it up, turn this part around. Okay, same here. Push it into place. Alright, that's it for the whole front part assembly. Now everything is nice in place. Test the landing gear again. See that everything works as intended. For the front to close really good, you have to sometimes apply some force, like twist hard, because this has to move up over this ridge. The front arm has to move up over this ridge, like give it the last final push, and it's just like a few milligrees. So it closes up real nicely, and then you're good to go. And this is how it looks like. Now to continue with the assembly of the hull. Next part here is the cockpit. I've already assembled the cockpit, but I can quickly show you. It's same snap fit, just pins and pieces that are designed to hold everything in place. And the cockpit chairs are made of several pieces as well. You have the backrest that goes into the seat. Backrest can be put down and up, should snap in place as well in the up position, and then you just put the assembled seat into this slider here, into the opening, and then you have the slide levers you assemble here. This pushes all the way underneath the seat to the other side, clicks in place, so you can use the slider to slide the seats back and forth. As I explained in the recent video, this is for easy access to the pilots in the cockpit once it's fully assembled. And then they have a little bit of a tighter tolerance in the front, so when you push them in front, they stay in place in the front and don't fall back if you move your ship up and down. So to bring in the cockpit, fairly easy. You open up the landing gear, and then you just take the cockpit. There's a tip on top that goes in first, like here, and then you just slide it all the way in until everything lines up, and then you just push it in here, push it in here. There's 4 pins on the back of the cockpit, and everything fits nicely, sits in place nicely. Last thing you have to do is to add the cockpit door. Fairly easy. You just push it in from here, wiggle it in. Here you can see the pins, and then just push it in place, and then you can close this door shut. Here's where your pilots can enter the cargo modules. And now we can close up the rest of the front fuselage. This is the last part of the front fuselage. I already put in the windows, the glass parts. These are also snap fit. If you want to get them as shiny as transparent as I have here, you can just take any transparent resin to print it, and you cover it with several coats of gloss varnish, and this should give you a nice transparency effect and also nice glossiness. And then you can simply push everything together. And don't be afraid to give it a really, really good push, because it needs to sit tightly. Alright, we got the front part assembled. Last thing we need here is the cockpit doors. Same thing with the windows. I already put in the windows. These are all snap fit, and those use these small hinges here. Push it in here, and the other end goes here. Just push it in, and the cockpit door is in place. Now to open up the cockpit, as I showed in the last video, you simply open the cockpit door handle, and then you can push it open. And to access your pilot, you just move back the seat, can put the pilot in place, and then close it up. The other door as well. And here we go. Door in place. And close it up. The final piece for the front hull is this. There's a little nose cover. This will come in different variations as well. You will have some alternatives you can use, and this goes just in like here, just to give like a little bit of a color accent, detail accent. Just push it in like here, and there you have the final nose assembly. So there's still a few parts missing. What I want to do first is put in the pins for the hulls. By the way, these pins, you can always access them, so the assembly is not final. If you, in case you have to change something, for example, here's pin number 1. You can see there's numberings on the inside. Pin number 1. Pin number 1 goes down here, connects the bottom back fuselage with the back middle fuselage. So in case you need to disassemble this, you can access the pin from the inside down here, so you can always use, I don't know, like a small Allen wrench or some buzz or whatever to push this out from the inside. So nothing here is final. You can always disassemble the model. Pin number 2 goes here, and on the other side, pin number 3. And we continue with 4 here. Number 5, and then the last pins here in front, we already used those 2 in the middle, is 8 and 9. On the other side, push it all the way in, and done. Now the hull fuselage assembly is locked in place, nothing will fall apart, and we can continue with the rest. What I want to do first is install the back Mech hook. You have the fold out stopper, which goes down here. Pop this into place, simple, easy. And then we take the hook and just push it in. Need some pressure, because this also needs to hold tight in place. You can see everything works as intended. And you have the stopper down here that prevents the Mech from dropping down if it's in action. And then you can fold everything right up. And the last things that are missing are the cover for our cargo release. And you can wiggle it in, feel a small snap. You can open and close it. Small pieces on the side, small knobs that hold it in place. You can just push on the side of the cover a little bit if you want to release it. It's very easy. And there's one last piece missing. That's the lower storage space cover. And here we go. And that's it. Closes up nicely as well. It also got these little stoppers on the side. This is where we can store our Mech shoulder hook, as I showed you in the last video also. Just put it in like there, close it up, we're all fine. Good to go. Alright, so the last thing that's missing is the assembly of the engines, including the deployable VTOL thrusters. And for this, the first thing you have to do is you take the correct lower engine pod for each side and just push this in on the wing as far as it goes. For the assembly, it's best practice to close the landing gear. So push these in place. Both sides now, and make sure this gear rack is put down. There's another rail that prevents it from moving sideways, so this is how you put them in this opening. And then once you have that, we need a gear to push in. It's like this. There are small pegs down here. They have to go in first in a 45-degree angle. You can't miss it, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then we have to put in the axle because the space is quite limited. There's a small opening here, like a gap where you can push this through all the way, and then you just slide it in all the way here. And for the end assembly, you have these caps that go on this axle. They hold it in place. Just push it in. One in the front, one in the back. And then for the mechanism to really work, you have to close it up first, because otherwise the gear rack would push out the whole engine compartment. So first thing you have to do is take the cover part, put it on top, just push it down. That holds everything in place. And the next thing is to hold the parts together. The intake and the engine nozzle are used as pins as well. So for the intake fins, you just push them into the intake part like this. And then you can push this in. This is real tight. It's constructed in a like a conical way. So the further you push it in, the tighter it gets. Same goes for the engine nozzles. You can see that it's conical. So push this in, you can twist it a little bit, but this holds really nice and tightly in place. You don't need any glue at all, you don't need any screws or anything. This really holds together nicely. And the nozzle. And the final thing that's left to do is to add the rudders, left and right. Also again, snap fit with pins. So, here we go. That's the finished model. I know it has a lot of parts. It's not the easiest of assemblies. But if you're into model making, if you like stuff like Gunpla or scale modeling as well, this should really come easy to you. And yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did so, please leave a like and subscribe. And looking forward to see you back on the channel. Bye!